Okay, so today we're going to look at the Hamilton C6 ventilator. Okay, here is the ventilator unit itself, and here's the ventilator screen with the alarm bar on top. On the front of the vent here, you'll see ports, the blue and the silver port, and that's where the flow sensor is going to plug on. We've got our inspiratory port, and here we've got our expiratory port, and on the side here we've got ports for CO2 for capnography, but also got a port for SpO2, and also where our air gen nebulizer is going to plug in. So I'm going to start off by turning the ventilator on, and then I'm going to put a circuit on and show you how that goes in. So here is our circuit. Okay, it's got our expiratory valve on this end, and then our flow sensor on this end, the patient end. So I'm going to show you how that plugs on now. So as I start up the ventilator, you'll see on startup it does its own self-test. So we would recommend that the ventilator is turned off when it's not in use. So whoever comes to it has to turn it on. It only takes about 20 or 30 seconds to turn on, but you know that when it's turned on, it's in perfect working order. And also, there are 2 batteries on board at this particular ventilator, both 90 minutes each. So you have 3 hours from a full charge of battery power. So we'd recommend that the ventilator is left plugged in at all times. So whoever comes and wants to move the ventilator, when they unplug, they know they have 3 hours from that point. Here, I'm going to take off my expiratory valve. You've got a dust cover on the expiratory valve that you take off before you put it on. And then the expiratory valve plugs onto the expiratory port here, all the way anti-clockwise to get it in fully. And then it gets a 1/10 turn clockwise to lock it in. And then I've got my inspiratory limb, just marked inspiratory, which plugs onto my inspiratory port here. And then my expiratory limb, which plugs onto the expiratory valve. And then my flow sensor tubing, which is stuck together when it comes out of the packet. You need to peel it apart a couple of inches to give you a bit of room to plug it on the flow sensor ports. And then it's colour coded blue tube onto blue port, and then the clear tube onto the silver port. So now that circuit is ready to test. So here on the bottom left hand of the screen you'll see the pre-op check, and that's where I'm going to test the circuit. So when I hit pre-op check, you see there's 2 tests that must be done every time on the circuit, and also there's an O2 sensor test. You only need to do the O2 sensor test when you're prompted by the ventilator. You'll be prompted with a little message to tell you to test the O2 sensor. If you get the message, just press the O2 sensor button and it will calibrate the O2 sensor itself in the background. That takes 2 minutes, but you don't need to do it every time. You just need to do it when you're prompted by the ventilator. So the next test I'm going to do is tightness. So here I hit tightness, the ventilator tells me to disconnect the patient, and then it prompts me to tighten the patient's system. And using a gloved hand or putting the dust cover of the circuit back on the circuit, occlude the end of the circuit. You'll hear now the ventilator ramp up the pressure within the circuit. It's looking for a leak anywhere along. And that's it. So then hopefully we get the green tick and the date and the time. The next one I'm going to do is flow sensor. So this is the flow sensor. You get a sizing adapter with every circuit mounted on the flow sensor here, and that allows me to turn the flow sensor during calibration, so the ventilator is able to blow air over it in both directions, and I'll show you how that works. So I hit flow sensor, it tells me to disconnect the patient, and the first thing it prompts me to do is to turn the flow sensor. So using my sizing adapter, you plug it onto the sensor like so. It allows you then to turn it around and plug it onto the circuit. Now you see it says manoeuvre in progress. So what the vent is going to do now is blow air at 4 different rates over the sensor. It knows what rate it's blowing at, so it knows what the sensor should read. And then halfway through it's going to prompt me to turn the flow sensor back around to do the same manoeuvre in the opposite direction. I only get about 15 seconds from the time of the prompt to actually do the manoeuvre. So you must pay attention to the prompts on the screen. And as soon as it prompts you to do the manoeuvre, I've only 15 seconds from that point. So I unplug my flow sensor, turn it around to the normal position, mounting my sizing adapter back on the sensor, and now it says manoeuvre in progress, so it's doing the same calibration in the opposite direction. So if it does fail the flow sensor calibration, we'd say do it again, paying attention to the prompts. and if it fails a third time or a fourth time, you may need a new flow sensor, but we've never come across them failing out of the packet. Normally what catches people is that they haven't done the manoeuvre within the 15 seconds allocated. So that circuit is now ready to use. Very important. So the recommendation for turbine driven ventilators is that you would have a bacterial or viral filter on the inspiratory port or limb, but also with the current coronavirus, obviously you want very important to have your expiratory limb also filtered, and what we've seen most hospitals do is they're putting their bacterial viral filter here at the flow sensor end, so it's filtering the air going to the patient, but also it's filtering the air coming from the patient, so you're protecting clinical staff and the environment if you have an infectious patient. So before I put on my lung and run it, we're going to have a look at the modes. And if you see in the top right hand corner, we have the modes button, and here are all of the modes that are on the ventilator here. So we have 4 volume controlled modes. We have APV CMV and APV SIMV. APV stands for adaptive pressure ventilation, CMV stands for controlled mechanical ventilation, and SIMV stands for synchronized intermittent mandatory ventilation. So here we're guaranteeing a volume, but with APV in the algorithm, we're also managing the pressure with the volume that we've guaranteed. So we look at APV CMV, we'll confirm, and you see the controls here. We're setting a rate, tidal volume, PEEP, FiO2, a ratio, and also our flow trigger and our pressure wrap. Again, there's no support in this mode, so it's basic volume guarantee. If the ventilator is not expecting any interaction from the patient, so if the patient does trigger a breath, it won't be supported, and there's a chance that the ventilator will stack another breath on top of them depending on where they've triggered in the cycle. So that is APV CMV. Then APV SIMV, synchronized intermittent mandatory ventilation. Again, all the same settings, but we do have pressure support in the mode, so it will synchronize with patient activity. And also we can set our expiratory trigger sensitivity and all the other settings that were in CMV. So that is APV, SIMV. And here moving on to CMV and SIMV, again there's no APV in the algorithm, so it's not trying to manage the pressure, it's just guaranteeing a volume. So if we hit CMV, controlled mechanical ventilation, we're setting our rate, our volume over PEEP, oxygen, there's our ratio. But also here you can manipulate the flow pattern, where you can have a square pattern, descending, rounded, or rapidly descending. So that's the difference between this CMV and the previous CMVs. You can control the flow pattern. Then SIMV, synchronized intermittent mandatory ventilation, all of the same settings, but there is support in the mode, so it will synchronize with the patient's activity. And also, when you're adjusting your I time or your ratio, if there's an I time here, your I and E times are here, and your ratio will be down here as well. So that is SIMV. Moving down to the pressure controller biphasic modes, PCV, pressure controlled ventilation. You're setting your rate, also your pressure control over your PEEP, oxygen, IE ratio, trigger, and P-ramp. Again, there's no support in this mode, so the ventilator is not expecting any interaction from the patient. Then pressure SIMV, all of the same settings, but there is pressure support in the mode, so it'll synchronize with patient activity. Hamilton have something called P-sync, so that is syncing the support to your inspiration pressure. So automatically, if I turn my inspiration pressure to 13, my support automatically goes to 13. If you want to have clinically different support to your inspiration pressure, just untick your P-sync, and that then activates pressure support if you want to adjust that to have it differently to your pressure control, your inspiratory pressure. Pressure SIMV. Then SPONT is just your pressure support, or CPAP, you're just setting your support over your PEEP. So for a spontaneously breathing patient, all patient breaths are triggered. And then DuoPAP, a form of BiPAP here, where you're concentrating on your time to high and your pressure high. And then APRV, airway pressure relief ventilation, and here concentrating on your time to high, your pressure high, and also your time to low and pressure low. So if you were wanting to do, maybe if you've prone a patient that's in respiratory distress and you want to do inverse ratio ventilation, again it's available there on airway pressure relief ventilation, APRV. ASV and IntelliVent ASV, they're modes specific to Hamilton. So I'm going to start the ventilator running to explain ASV. It's easier to explain when it's running. So we'll have a look at that now. And then underneath them you can see we've got our non-invasive mode. So we've got NIV, which is your non-invasive, so you're setting your pressure support on your PEEP. Then all breaths are triggered. And then we've got NIV ST. ST stands for sequenced and timed. So I'm setting my pressure support on my PEEP, but I also have an I time and a rate. So that is my non-invasive BiPAP. And then we have our high flow, where you're just setting your flow and your FiO2. Hamilton ventilators will do a maximum flow of 80 litres per minute for high flow. So ASV, I'm going to start running ASV, and just go back to the home screen here. You can see we have our adult pediatric ventilation modes. They will do patients from, and this is an adult pediatric circuit, so that will do patients from 3 kilos up to full adult, 3 kilos being average birth weight. Then we also have 3 shortcuts here. So if you have 3 modes that you use a lot, you can put them on the front screen. There is also a neonatal mode, and that'll do patients from 200 grams up to 30 kilos. The neonatal takes a different flow sensor. So we're going to mainly be using adult pediatric. And this is important for ASV. So what the ventilator is looking for here is a patient height. Every patient height, I'll put in my own height, every patient height has an ideal body weight, and the ideal body weight is how we work out a patient's minute volume. So my ideal body weight is 66 kilos, so we know then that my minute volume is 6.6 litres a minute, which is 100 mils per kilo of ideal body weight, and that's the constant. So that's why the ventilator is looking for height. So we'll set defaults for alarms, for delivered tidal volume and those kind of things, but in ASV, which we're going to run now, it'll also set a target minute volume. So it's important to have your height for ASV. So I put in my height. I'm going to dial down my FiO2 to 21% because we're running on room air. So put in my height and then start. So what the ventilator is doing now, when I put my lung on, so the ventilator now is going to give 3 test breaths into the lung that I've just put on. And if we look at my ASV graph here, we can see the target minute volume is 6.6 litres per minute. My vertical axis is tidal volume, my horizontal axis is frequency. So the ventilator is going to use a combination of frequency and tidal volume to achieve the target minute volume. The curve on the graph is all of the combinations of frequency and tidal volume that will achieve the minute volume. The red box that's just appeared is all of the safe combinations that will achieve the target minute volume, and the green dot on the curve is the ideal combination of frequency and tidal volume that will achieve the minute volume based on the mechanics of this lung that I put it on. So you can see it's aiming for a volume of 505 and a frequency of 13 to achieve 6.6 litres a minute. We've got the mode that we're on here. We've got the main monitored parameters here. Drawing your attention to this one. So Hamilton ventilators have the driving pressure as a monitored value. So I've done nothing, only put in my height, press start, and the ventilator has taken over and is now appropriately ventilating this lung. So ASV stands for adaptive support ventilation. So I'm going to show you the couple of adaptive parts of it. I'm going to start to trigger some breaths. And a triggered breath is denoted by a pink triangle underneath the flow waveform and the trigger. I'm simulating some spontaneous patient breathing. And now I'm going to stop. So what the ventilator does now is pausing, looking to see if I'm going to carry out any more spontaneous breathing. And when the apnea runs on and I don't trigger any more breaths, the ventilator will deliver me a breath. And then it's going to pause again, looking to see if I do any more spontaneous activity. And when I don't trigger any more breaths, it'll deliver me a breath. And then the pause will get shorter and shorter until it's back into full mandatory ventilation. So you see the ASV mode will go all the way from pressure support CPAP for a spontaneously breathing patient, all the way back in to a full mandatory pressure mode if the patient is struggling, or back out again to pressure support for CPAP. So it's always trying to encourage the spontaneous breathing, so hopefully we can get patients weaned off the ventilator quicker. Also, what I want to show you now with the adaptive part of ASV is how the ventilator will react to changes in static compliance over time. So here on my ASV graph we see we've got my resistance, also the breaths per minute of the ventilator, how much spontaneous activity is doing, and in my dynamic lung picture here we've got our static compliance and also our resistance, so that's my inspiration pressure. My static compliance is 48, which isn't great, but it's not too bad. So what I'm going to do is make the compliance really, really poor. So I'm going to hold on to my lung a little bit and just watch that compliance number deteriorate. So you can see my compliance is dropping down. My compliance number has now gone from 48 down to 28. And if you look at my ASV graph, my red box is starting to get longer. So you can see it's starting to increase the frequency and lower the tidal volume, which is what you would do with someone who's in respiratory distress. But again, the computer is doing all of this, computer on board the ventilator is doing all of this itself. So again, my compliance dropping down pretty poor. My pressures are increasing, but again, it's the ventilator that is doing all of those adjustments. You can see as the pressure rises up, my compliance is increasing, and I'll squeeze that a little bit harder. But you can see ASV then is reacting all of the time based on the reading of the mechanics of the lung. Okay. So then if you want to switch out the control we have for ASV, which is I should explain here now. So we're controlling a percentage of the target minute volume. So the target minute volume is 6.6 litres a minute, and the default then is we want to achieve 100% of the 6.6 litres a minute. Okay, so we're not adjusting frequency or tidal volume or pressures. The ventilator is doing all of that. So if we see a rise in our CO2, for example, normally we would increase our frequency to try and scrub out the CO2, or maybe increase our pressure a little bit. And the overall effect of increasing your frequency or your tidal volume is that your minute volume goes up. So here, rather than using frequency or tidal volume or pressure to increase the minute volume, we actually just increase the minute volume itself. So if I see a rise in my CO2 and I want to scrub it out, Hamilton recommend increments of 10% of an increase. I'll turn my percentage target up by 10%. My minute volume target goes from 6.6 to 7.3, and you'll see my frequency will move up then. So that is how we would control ASV. So rather than using pressure, frequency or tidal volume to control the minute volume, we just control the minute volume. So let's return that to normal. If you want to change into any other mode, just press your mode button. We pick pressure SIMV, confirm. If we're happy with those controls, confirm, and you see the ventilator has just slipped in to the mode that we've picked. So we've got our main controls over here on the right hand side. The controls brings me back into that control screen. Alarms then is where I can manually adjust any of the alarms. There's a Pmax alarm here. All Hamilton modes default to a Pmax of 40. There's a restriction 10 centimetres of water below what your Pmax is set at. So if you've got airway pressures coming up to 30 or rising to 30, the ventilator will start to restrict the breaths. And if you're happy for airway pressures to rise into the 30s, if you dial up your Pmax, so I dial to 45, my restriction lifts up to 35, or if I dial it up to 40, if I dialed it up to 48, my restriction would lift to 38, and so on. Always 10 centimetres of water below what your Pmax is set at. In the system button then, this is where we can go back into the calibration screen. It's also where your battery time remaining will appear. And when you unplug the ventilator, after a couple of minutes when the ventilator works out, depending on frequencies, etc., how much battery power is left, it will tell you in minutes how long is left. That is in system. Events then is everything we've done since we switched on the vent, every adjustment that we've made. In tools here's where we can use our PV tool, which is putting on a pressure volume curve, where we can use that as a recruitment maneuver, or just we can use it to see how much recruitable volume is in the lungs. Also here's where we can do an inspiratory hold or an expiratory hold, and where we can get into the configuration, which we don't need to do. Graphics then is your graphical layout. If you want to have 4 waveforms on the screen, you can have 4 waveforms, where a lot of vents are like. If you want to have, that's my default screen that I'm set up for. Also, you can have your force grade. If you want your volume, you can have a transpulmonary pressure, you can have esophageal pressures, you can have the screen as busy as you like, or you can also have it as simple as you like. So this is a Hamilton's dynamic lung, which is the visual indicator of how the lungs are performing in real time. So that's graphics, my graphical interface. My main monitor parameters are here, and if I go into monitoring, these are all the monitor parameters. So you can see we've got a plateau pressure, we've got our driving pressure, we've got our PEEP, our auto PEEP here as well, I&E flows. There's my minute volume, I&E times, mils per kilo, resistance, static compliance, the time constant, how much leak is in the circuit, and that's all in monitoring. And here on the hard keys then we've got our alarm silence button. It silences the alarm for 2 minutes unless you get a fresh alarm. Then we've got our O2 flush, so when I press my O2 flush it gives me 100% oxygen for 2 minutes. If I'm doing open suctioning, then when I disconnect from the patient, the ventilator will give me a minute unalarmed to do my suctioning manoeuvre, and then when I reconnect it'll automatically start to ventilate again and gives me 2 minutes of 100% oxygen for reoxygenation. If you're obviously doing closed suctioning, you just press your O2 button and you will get your 2 minutes then for your closed suctioning manoeuvre. My O2 flush. There's a screen lock here. When I press it, it locks the screen so I can't do anything on the screen. I have a mandatory breath, which allows me to deliver a breath to peak and holds it there for as long as I hold the button. I also have the nebulizer button here, so this nebulizer button will turn on this pneumatic nebulizer here, which is different to my Aerogen nebulizer, which plugs in here and is controlled through the handset. And then I also have my data transfer button, and I have my power button, and the only way to stop the ventilator ventilating is you press the power button, and if you activate standby, it'll bring you back into the standby screen. Just to point out as well, in my alarms it brings me into my alarms here, but if we look at the main monitor parameters, the actual alarm limits appear beside the parameter itself. So I know here in my tidal volume that my high limit is 800, my low limit is 270, and if I press those figures, it's another way to bring me in to that alarms tab. So then to stop the ventilator, and the only way to stop the ventilator is the power button one time, activate standby, and it brings me back into the standby screen, defaulting to last patient, so we can start the ventilator again, and the settings we just finished at. If we have a new patient, pick the adult pediatric software, and then we can put in our patient parameters and get going.